Just ahead, there's another edition of the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks and in the Orlando area of Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
I'm political analyst Al Spry. This is the book, How Money Walks.
It grows legs and wings and flies away from your wallet. The author, Travis H. Brown, financial expert, boy, does he have his facts down. And we're going to spend an hour chatting with him about why some states win, some states lose in tax policy. If you'll stay put, the Florida Roundtable begins following these messages. This is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks, and in the Orlando area, we're also seen on Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
I'm political analyst Al Spry. Reagan, always great to see you.
A pleasure to share these quarters with you each week, sir.
Great to see you on Tough TV 38, and
That's
also
right.
We are happy to be on over 80 stations across the Florida News Network. You can watch us on Tough TV on TV 38 in Orlando. You can receive Tough TV 38 over the air in select apartment complexes. You can also get us on Channel 69 on the Summit Broadband cable TV system. If you don't currently get us on Bright House or DirecTV or Dish, just go ahead and call them up, write them a letter, write them an email and say, I want my Tough TV.
There you
and
go.
they will they'll get it for you. That
Yeah.
way we can be seen and also heard, Reagan.
I like it. All right.
So tell me about the NSA and the strange bedfellows.
It's funny, in this past week, the ongoing argument over what to do with the NSA. Do they restrict it? Are they trying to get too much information?
Well, obviously, our opinion is it's
Yeah.
an abridgment of the Fourth
Sure.
Amendment. You might as well throw the Fourth Amendment out the window. That's the one about privacy.
We're finding this argument making some strange bedfellows in the United States Senate on Capitol Hill. People, of course, like Rand Paul, are saying, oh, they've overreached and they're taking too much invasion of privacy and whatnot. And on the other side, we find Florida's junior U.S. Senator Marco Rubio coming down with the rather liberal former senator and U.S. Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, in saying they're doing just fine. You need to leave them alone. They got to go on doing what they're doing.
Right. And so you have two forces at play here. And, of course, we never follow the D or the R per se because that's a lot of BS usually, Reagan.
Yeah.
Well, what I will say is you have the forces of, like I like to call the forces of fear, right? The forces of control, the forces of power that want to have entrenched power. And that would be the Hillary Clintons, the Mitch McConnells, the John McCain's, the Hillary, now Marco Rubio's. These are the folks that it doesn't matter if there's a D or an R next to their name.
Yeah.
They want to keep the status quo. Then, of course, you have the freedom-based people, politicians and the like, libertarians, and also this is also Democrat and Republican, and there are guys like Rand Paul and a lot of Democrats. We have several that we've spoken to, and so you have it crosses parties,
Yes,
which is weird.
it
Makes
does.
strange bedfellows.
Yeah, I guess that was the point in telling the whole story.
Yeah.
Is people you wouldn't normally put on the same side of an issue.
And it's things like some people really love the power.
Mm-hmm.
And you could tell by their votes and the positions they take that they want the most power. That's why if Hillary Clinton gets in, we're not going to see many changes from Obama. And if the Republican gets in, if it's one of the Republicans like they ran most recently, like Romney, who's another status quo guy, we're not going to see changes either way, Reagan. So it'll be a continuation of the status quo, and that's not really good for democracy, I don't think.
No, we seem to have fallen back into a rut that we were into years ago, where many of the issues, they're coming down on the same side, and one side says, well, yeah, we agree, but we can do it better. We can run it better than they can. We're not going to change it, but we can clean it up and run it better. And we saw that for a long time, especially in the years coming out of World War II. Until Ronald Reagan came along. So I think you happen to be right there, Al.
Well, I appreciate that, Reagan. And before we go to break, Charlie Crist's new book, I have to kind of give Charlie a little ribbing on this. It's called The Party's Over. Bad title, Reagan.
Yeah, I agree.
Nobody wants the party to be over. Nobody wants the hangover, Reagan. We want the party to continue.
The candles flicker and dim.
I think Charlie should call it, I'm a party guy. Let's have a freaking party. That's what he should call the book. Not The Party's Over. Bad title. Bad Charlie.
I don't know who sold him on that one, but they certainly
Something
did.
really negative. Probably Debbie Downer or something. Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I have to rip her too.
Put us down as neutral about that, right? Okay. All right.
No, we're party guys.
That's right. Okay. Well, this is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
We will be joined by Travis Brown as the conversation continues. We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks, and in the Orlando area of Tough TV. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
And Al, as promised, at this point in the program, we are turning to the long-distance telephone here, where we are joined by Travis Brown. He is the author of How Money Walks. He is the co-founder of a St. Louis-based public affairs and advocacy group. He is the president of Let Voters Decide, which is a coalition that supports state tax reform and voters' rights. Oh, lots of things. Travis, welcome to the Florida Roundtable.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm sit here kind of babbling all about you, and how about you go ahead and take a minute or so here and just tell us a little bit about more about yourself, and then we'll get into this How Money Walks.
Well, great. I am a Missouri-based entrepreneur that has operations in Florida as well, out of Collier County, and we began looking at what we could learn from the Internal Revenue Service taxpayer data file several years ago. And the good news is we have information about how people have moved with their wallet and their feet over the last 18 years since digital archive records of taxpayer returns have been made available. The bad news was it was not made searchable, navigable, or easy to use on your smartphone. So hence the release of How Money Walks, both in print, online, through Kindle, and audiobooks even, a way of looking at how Americans have moved their income and their residency over the last 18 years. We're talking about a period since 1992 to 2010.
Now, what made you decide that a study such as this was necessary?
Well, being originally from Missouri, we know that there are a lot of people, especially this season, before global warming hit us bad this winter, that have already been going down during peak season to places like Florida. We knew that Missouri income was leaving for higher growth areas, but we couldn't measure it with precision. By looking at all state 1040 tax return information, we can see and track where working income has moved. And we're talking about, in aggregate, about 43 million Americans, $2 trillion, roughly the size of the economy of California. So this is literally reshaping America in substantial ways, especially when it comes to the Sunshine State, because it gains more income than any other state in America over this 18-year period.
Okay, well, I like the way that you're looking at this data. It's important to realize that when people are looking to relocate, there are several factors, obviously. One is, like you said, weather. That's why I moved from New York. Also, there was a lot of high taxes in New York. I take it You're a conservative gentleman.
Well, it's really hard not to be when you look at the correlations that taxpayers as a whole have been fleeing high-tax states like New York,
Right.
over $18.9 billion coming
Right.
from the Empire State to the Sunshine State. And they've been flocking to low-tax states, not just for weather. We have 9 states that do not punish work, that have no personal income tax. And keep in mind, we're tracking working income, because if you didn't work or you tried to retire, you're not trying to earn state 1040 tax return income.
Right,
So,
and that another reason, just to follow up, another reason I moved is, I like the tax situation in Florida. We don't have an income tax here. We're one of several states that don't. There's a few others, Texas and a couple others, which makes sense to people, especially people that are looking to obviously maximize their income. Not that I'm not saying that a lot of people seem to be against taxes, but I mean, obviously, some taxes are necessary. You'd agree to that, yes?
That's right. Tax factors are not the only factor with making a move to Florida, but they are an important factor, and too often ignored as the volume and the reason of growth and trade in a place like Florida. So it would be equally erroneous to assume that we don't have them as an advantage, that the mode of taxation, the way that we collect revenue for government, really does matter. And what Floridians can tell the rest of America is that they have a pretty good tax system, a system that's very local, a system that does not punish your work so you can produce and earn more, and a system that taxes a lot of things at consumption.
What I like about Florida, and one of the reasons Reagan and I live here, I think Reagan would concur, is because we have a very fiscally, I think, responsible state. We have a balanced budget amendment, which I think Congress should adopt in the U.S. We have allocations. The only one thing I'm not crazy about is the push towards vouchers and privatization, especially privatization of prisons, because I think that creates a corrupt system. But I like a lot of things that Florida has done. You can't have everything. So that's one of the Reagan. What do you like about Florida, tax wise?
I do. From me, all these years ago, family came to Winter Park, and I fell in love with Winter Park. It was kind of like a piece of New England that was plunked down in the middle of Central Florida, and I thought that 30 years of 17 degrees below zero was enough.
Yeah.
And then when you lump on top of that the fact that there is no state income tax here. You pay no state tax on the income. Businesses are less leaned upon. When I left the greater Cleveland area, there was a city income tax. Never mind just a state income tax and your federal taxes. We paid a city income tax, and there was reciprocity. If you didn't live in Cleveland or you lived in a suburb, they taxed back and forth, and they still got their hand in your pocket. And so you could come here and make less money, net less money from your work, and actually come out making more money than you did when you lived in Ohio, where the taxes were so much higher. And it was a contributing factor in my coming down here, without a doubt.
Well, your story is not unlike many others from either New England or the northeastern states, which are responsible for a lot of the growth, especially on the Atlantic side of Florida over the last 18 years. It adds up, and it's not just the financial ramifications, it's the consumer control that you have and the avoidance of those other kinds of taxes up north that you saw as a punishment for work. So there really is a dominant model. We're talking about a New York minute being $7,200 in lost adjusted gross income based on scoring all of this data, whereas a Florida minute now producing on average $10,000 a minute, every minute of every day on average for every year on 18 years.
Well, and obviously the theory of conservatives, and correct me if I'm wrong, is I'm not a true believer in trickle down economics, supply side economics, same difference. Because I'm not seeing it trickle down as much as everyone was hoping it would. I'm sure it's not trickling down as much as Ronald Reagan, who kind of came up with popularized the idea, thought it would. When do we And I'm going to take you on a little aside here because you're a well-versed guy. When do we start seeing the upper echelon of job creators, moneymakers, rich, however you want to term them, because there's obviously all these euphemisms that are used nowadays for rich folks. When do you start seeing the trickle-down effect? Because I'm not seeing it. Reagan's not seeing it. It's been 30 years since Reaganomics, over 30 years. When do we start seeing the benefits? Because obviously the richest are getting richer. The middle class has disappeared for the most part and continues to degrade. The poor are making out pretty well, actually, because they don't have to work and they're not paying anything in and they're taking a lot out. So when do we see a trickle down into the middle class from the upper class, in your opinion? Because everything seems right. We have a lot of policies that are pro-this, pro-growth, pro-jobs, and like you just alluded to.
Well, for starters, you look at the U.S. National economy. We're about $16 trillion. 70% of that economic activity comes from consumer spending. That is individual decisions from working class families, median families. So that's still the lion's share of where our real growth comes from. And there have actually been gains in the last generation toward the middle class, if you look deeper within those numbers. Of course, that means that upper income quintiles are going to accelerate along with that growth. So what's great about the How Money Walks analysis that we can do, where you can download on your smartphone and look for this information by your county, by your city, and by your state on your own, is that you can see this adjusted gross income can be quite substantial, and in some cases it's for high incomes, and for other cases it's not. For example, Palm Beach County in Florida has received a massive amount, $14 billion, and we know that that is a shift, if you look deeper in the numbers, with predominantly higher income people. But a shift away from Tallahassee to Wakulla County is working class folks that are looking at a different county a little bit closer to the Gulf. So you can see a lot and learn a lot from this information with the howmoneywalks.com.
Let me ask you this now. Al talked about how he got here from New York, and I talked about Ohio. As you did this study and put this book together, the stories that you heard, are we on track? Is that, why did so much wealth walk? I mean, there are probably more reasons than we were just talking about, but what other kinds of things did you find?
Well, particularly for Florida listeners, it's important that people understand that the accumulation of $95.6 billion over the last 18 years is 2.5 times greater than the next state that received income from other states like Texas, with nearly 25 billion gains. So it is remarkable what Florida has done as a result of non-residents choosing its state and picking up its residency and making it there. That also has meant that you've seen massive amount of growth in infrastructure and needs and spending. But to your point, it's generally carried itself very well. We have stories from all kinds of places around America. I'll mention one from Santa Rosa County, near Pensacola there, where a father who's single, raising 2 kids, comes up to me and says, I had an offer to leave the base and leave my employment in another state, but when I penciled it out, because I live in a no-income tax state, I was financially better off. I can apply more disposable income towards my son's college tuition by staying a resident of Florida. We hear these stories after time in all kinds of different situations.
All right. Well, it is time for us to pause along the network line here. Let us remind you that you are listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, and in the Orlando area of Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest this day is Travis Brown. He is the author of How Money Walks. And you can, he's got all kinds of websites and tax expertise. And we trust that you're going to be interested in this book because some of the numbers here are absolutely astounding, and we're going to take a look at much more of them. If you'll stay put, our conversation continues following these messages. From Pensacola to Key West and all points in between, you're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks and in the Orlando area of Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest today, author Travis Brown, How Money Walks, his new book. Information on the book at howmoneywalks.com.
You know what? I'm going to write a book as a follow-up, and I'm going to call it How Money Walks Out of My Wallet. That's what I'm going to call it.
Mine flies out of mine. You're lucky yours walks. mine sort of waves goodbye on the way out there.
Mine gives me the finger. I don't know why. But it's good. It's good to have you on, Travis.
Yes.
I wanted to follow up. Who are the biggest winners? Obviously, Florida's a big winner. You could just tell. I call Florida the new California. But what are some other? We don't have all those taxes in California, which makes us even better, and we have a lower cost of living, and we have cheaper real estate. But what are some winners in your book, state-wise, and what are some losers?
Right. Well, we spoke of Florida being America's biggest winner and New York being America's biggest losing situation. Others that do well with low taxes on income includes Texas. People with that live in states very different than that climate do well in Washington State, in Tennessee, even in New England. $3.5 billion going into New Hampshire, surrounded by higher tax positions there. Illinois, California, suffering greatly in Chicago and Los Angeles in our analysis. So the winners are winning big, and the losers are losing big as well.
Do you think it's safe to say that when people were making a higher income, they didn't mind paying those taxes, those state and local taxes, as much as they do, and now they're just trying to deal with less, and so maybe that's a reason they're moving to no state, low state tax states?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier that people feel very sensitive to the money that goes out of their wallet, and they also know the disposable income is hard to recapture in alternative ways. So they're looking for what's going to help every paycheck, what's going to build more in their annual salary, and in what their lifetime earning potential might be in one state versus another. They often don't think about making a big move, but when they do, we've learned that the U-Haul truck just as easily moves out of the Bronx and goes to Miami as it does to New Jersey.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That's the real thing. Mobility has increased. The job opportunities in today's economy are very different than they were a generation ago.
Now, interestingly enough, with all the growth that we have in Florida, and we have just exploded. I mean, we've grown like Topsy, sometimes seemingly out of control. And as the population continues to increase so rapidly, we have to have it's no longer all retirees coming down here to play shuffleboard. St. Petersburg used to be the shuffleboard king of the world. But
it's still a pretty slow.
Yeah, we have to have jobs and job creation. Address that for us.
Well, there's good news there too. Florida has been recovering from the national recession quite well relative to the other states. Nearly 200,000 jobs created just last year, a little bit behind Texas. What Texas has done with 252,000 last year is really remarkable. They've led job growth 4 straight years, but for Texas, America would be much worse off. But both Florida and Texas are seeing an increase in labor force participation, which is a better indicator, I think, than unemployment rates that tend not to track people that fall out of the job market. But to your point, within the state, we see in this movement, you can track by downloading this app on your phone, the How Money Walks application or the Taxpayer Data Explorer will show you this, that places like Miami-Dade County are feeders for other jobs and income potential going north up the Atlantic and even servicing the hospitality and tourism industries in Orange County.
Now, how be a little more specific about that? How is that translating?
Well, for example, if we look at Orange County, Orlando area, we see a gain in our analysis. We're on our howmoneywalks.com. You can search this by county, and you'll see the number one place that Orange County has received income is from Miami-Dade. That people are coming up from Broward, and then people are coming down from Chicago, Queens, New York, and the Bronx. So there's both out-of-state, non-resident migration coming directly to Orlando, but there are people coming up from within the state to serve those jobs and that income potential as a part of the growth around Orlando. We know from other figures that nearly 100 million tourists have visited Florida last year, and at least half of that was going right into the greater Orlando area. So that's a situation where you can link growth and the expansion of tourism and trade in other areas in a similar way to see really how Florida is shaping itself for the future.
I want to kind of follow up along the lines of the main point of your book. We saw last year Detroit declare bankruptcy, which is something I'd never thought I would see in my lifetime. Detroit was, of course, always the shining beacon of the industrial capabilities of America, and now it's not. It's far from that. What are we going to see a trend of other cities becoming Detroits, and if so, which ones?
Well, Detroit is not alone. We all suffer from Detroit's loss, but it does show the increasing polarity in America, where people try to tax their way, out of these problems without addressing spending and debt and balanced budgets, as you mentioned earlier. Southern California has very similar problems. San Jose, Orange, a variety of different places down there that are on the brink of that. Chicago, so much income coming from Cook County, Illinois, to places like Fort Myers and Tampa and St. Pete, because nearly 2/3 of their general revenue collected into the city is now servicing debt obligations and not going to police officers and schools that need that attention. So we're at a real dangerous point with some cities unless they balance their budgets, look at their revenue streams, and stop penalizing work. Of course, besides the fact that what we see in How Money Walks, where people exercise their mobility by moving their incomes, the real issue for those legacy cities is that they're left with a shrinking tax base of fewer entrepreneurs that want to endure that kind of pain.
How do you turn that around? Obviously, we're talking about having a pro-growth tax policy. They've got to turn things around and get it to grow. What can you tell them?
Well, first and foremost, let's start with the facts. So too often, some of America's biggest cities have been adding population, but bleeding out income. And we can see that with the How Money Walks application. And that's true for even places on the East Coast like Washington, D.C.'s metro area. No one would argue, living as a resident of Washington, D.C., that larger, more people, more traffic, more infrastructure. But when you look at all transfers in versus all transfers out, even in a big government town, they're losing a lot of income, billions of dollars. So this first needs to be understood for the people that can and will do something about it. There are situations where, people don't want to change or they don't want to acknowledge these trends. And that's unfortunate because it makes it that much harder in the future as these problems continue to expand. But it spells real opportunity for places like Fort Lauderdale, Naples, Fort Myers receiving other kinds of corporate and business income as companies like Hertz Rent-A-Car consolidate operations away from Oklahoma, away from New Jersey, and right into Gulf Coast Florida.
It's interesting here before we go to break, the 9 states with 0 state personal income taxes, according to your book here: Alaska, Florida, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, and Wyoming gained $146 billion. The 9 states with the highest personal income tax rates: California, Hawaii, Oregon. Everything's expensive in Hawaii. Oregon, Iowa, New Jersey, Vermont, Washington, D.C., New York, and Maine lost $107 billion. You could definitely see the shift right there.
Well, that's right. And keep in mind, we're not studying this. It's not a survey. It's not a regression. We're looking at all U.S. income that's reported through the IRS that we can see over a long-term period between boom and bust cycles, and the pattern's very distinct. People go to where their work is most welcome.
And the most important thing, and then we'll take a break, is there used to be family ties that kept you in certain geographic areas. There were certain support groups, but people don't. That's not the same as it was 20, 30 years ago. People will say, "All right, see you, mom and dad. See you, sis. Whatever." Well, I'm moving 1,000 miles away without really a blink of an eye. Where you never really saw that before. You saw families 30 plus before that sticking in the same geographic areas for family reasons. So, Reagan?
And I was nodding my head in agreement, Al. I think this is very true. And I tell you what, let us take a pause along the network line. We'll remind folks that this is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest is Travis Brown. He is the chairman of Let Voters Decide, the president of it. He's the author of How Money Walks, and you go to howmoneywalks.com for lots more information. Winning and losing, personal tax issues, all this marvelous data, unimpeachable, we might add. This is all material that is gleaned from the Internal Revenue Service records. So it's pretty strong stuff. Stay put. Our conversation continues following these messages. We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks, and in the Orlando area on Tough TV 38 as well. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest this day is author Travis Brown. We might say financial expert. That is true. He spent a long time putting together this book, How Money Walks. You can find it at howmoneywalks.com. You can order it through your local bookstores, places like Amazon.com. They will get it for you. And Travis, we thank you for spending all this time with us today. We know you're a busy fellow. You are also the president of Let Voters Decide. Now, that's a coalition that supports state tax reform. You're looking at voters' rights. Tell us about that.
Well, as we've mentioned with the How Money Walks application and the data we've been covering, you begin to see pretty clearly that when you raise the price on work, you can expect to see less of it around the country, high-tax states and low-tax states. Florida's been one of those privileged areas that has kept spending in check. Over the last few years, Governor Rick Scott has been eliminating a lot of burdensome regulations as well and trying to get lower prices on overall tax burdens. So all that's been very positive. Other states have had bigger challenges. Last year, there were over 18 states across America that have some kind of personal tax on income that have reduced it, and in a couple of situations eliminated it, so that basically choosing the Florida or the Texas economy. So the race is on. Places like Kansas have zeroed out self-employment income in hopes to create a heartland tax rebellion. Places like Ohio have been looking at oil and gas royalties from fracking, changing their landscape by lowering taxes. Places like Indiana, with Governor Pence, cutting and eliminating inheritance taxes so that you don't have to die in Florida if you want to visit. So a lot of changes.
And that's the thing. I mean, it's kind of like a state version of a capitalist system, which is supposed to promote competition. And so now you're having, I guess, competition of the states to see how better ways to keep people in their states, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I think that a lot of states are bloated. I think New York's very bloated. I think California's very bloated. There's a lot of programs, a lot of money that's being wasted and been wasted over the last few decades. You got Jerry Brown back in California. It's like the Californians are missing the old days, when there was lots of money flowing and everybody got freebies and everything. And so I think that it's a good thing. Reagan? What do you think?
Well, I do agree with you, Al, and I wanted to point out, too, that one of the endorsements of How Money Walks came from a gentleman that I had a lot of respect for over the years, and he's still around. We haven't heard too much from him lately, at least not down here in Florida, and that is Dr. Arthur Laffer. And Travis, tell us about your relationship with Dr. Laffer.
Well, Art Laffer is one of the greatest economists here in the last 50 years to look at this sense of state competition across states, the way that we look at Americans versus the rest of the world in economic performance. So going backwards now 40 or 50 years, you can see that a lot of other correlations stack up. Art is someone that's done that. For example, the inverse of what we're describing with the How Money Walks movement of income, we can see there have been 11 states, according to Laffer's analysis, that once had no personal income tax, that for different reasons in the last 50 years chose to adopt one. And in Art's analysis, in 11 of 11 cases, their gross state product declined within 10 years of adopting a personal income tax. We have never seen a state tax its way into prosperity.
That's a good way to put it. Why do you think states enacted all these taxes to begin with? Let's delve deep into the history before we have to go.
Well, the national income tax came to eliminate, in part, beer taxes in Congress, and there were some unique coalitions of the day. The first national income tax by Abraham Lincoln came because of war, and that was typically the way we chose to tax income. Temporary sacrifices that would expire after those kinds of conflicts to our national security were resolved. But as too often is the case, the revenue becomes a dependency. The interest to keep that around creates more and more spending, and too often these programs do not expire. And then they tend to fall short on revenue, as you mentioned with Governor Brown and California and places like Illinois, where they are ignoring unfunded liabilities and other spending and debt problems. They watch those problems get worse, and it becomes harder and harder to dig out of them.
One quick last question for you here. Can Florida sustain where we are, our low tax rate system, and all this growth that has happened and we see coming? Is this sustainable?
Well, it certainly looks that way from our How Money Walks income projections, from taking past performance, looking at projections from 2010 to the end of this year. We're projecting over $22.9 billion more in adjusted gross income gain to the state of Florida. I think you have strong strength in tourism, strong trade positions with the rest of the world coming through ports like Tampa and Miami, and strong evidence that the trends towards many other counties in the real growth will continue. So I think the days are bright for the Sunshine State.
Travis Brown is the author of How Money Walks. You can check it out at howmoneywalks.com. He is also the president of Let Voters Decide, and we thank you for visiting with us today. It's a rather enlightening conversation with lots of marvelous information there, and we hope you'll come back and do it again, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Travis.
You're listening to the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
And we'll be back with a closing pot following these messages. We're back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
And Al, if we hustle along here, you just barely got time to squeeze in the winner and the loser of the week.
I like the New York hustle myself versus the L.A. hustle. Okay. The winner of the week is Tampa Bay TV stations. Democrats and Republicans have spent more than $6 million on TV ads, many of them attack ads, in the heated special election between Alex Sink and David Jolly for Pinellas County's 13th Congressional District. The loser of the week, Jeb Bush. We can only imagine how much it grates on the former governor that virtually every time Charlie Crist appears on TV, he talks about how his former party has lost his way by quoting Bush. He said it better than I ever could, Crist says over and over. Today's Republican Party, at least the leadership, is perceived as being anti-women, anti-minority, anti-immigrant, anti-education, anti-gay couples, and anti-environment.
I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Florida Roundtable, a weekly look at issues and problems of concern to Floridians from a state, national, and international perspective. Presented by the Florida News Network with your hosts, Reagan Smith and Al Spry. The views and opinions expressed during the preceding program are solely those of the participants and not necessarily those of this station's ownership, management, or sponsors of FNN. Your views and opinions are welcome. Address your card or letter to Florida Roundtable in care of Reagan Smith, 2500 Maitland Center Parkway, Suite 407, Maitland, Florida, 32751. Or you may email reagansmith@fnnonline.com. Thank you for listening, and please join us again next week for another edition of Florida Roundtable.